Hello, this is Rob. Welcome to North Country History with Rob Burg. Today I'm speaking to you from the banks of the AuSable River from Grayling, Michigan. And this is a special bonus episode in honor of Veterans Day, November 11th, 2025. This episode is being released on November 10th. So this is a special bonus in honor of a particular veteran who I knew very well. He was my uncle. And it's a North Country history tie-in because my uncle, Dudley Foster, and his wife, Angeline, my dad's older sister, retired to Grayling in the 1970s from their home in Chelsea, Michigan, my hometown as well, and settled onto the AuSable River. So this is the story of Dud and his time in World War II when he served in the United States Navy during the Normandy Invasion. So settle in, sit back, and enjoy the show. North Country History with Rob Burg, your podcast on the forest history of the Great Lakes region. So you may be asking yourself, how does World War II and the story of a particular Navy veteran tie into North Country history? Well, this is personal for me. My uncle Dudley Foster and his wife Angeline Berg, then Foster, they lived in Grayling on the AuSable River from about, I think, 1976 until, Angeline, Aunt Ange, she died in 1982, and then Dud lived on until 2002. And then the property passed on to his family, to most recently his son Scott, who sadly just passed away this year. But that's not part of this story so much. I miss you, Cousin Scott, but this is about your dad today. So Dud was here in Grayling when I moved up in 1998. Now, we had been visiting Dud and Ange basically since they had bought their property and built their place in, like I said, 1976 or so. I think I didn't visit until 77. Our family cabin in Alcona County was located about an hour and a half to the east, closer to Lake Huron. And so my dad, whenever we'd go visit our cabin, not all the time, but frequently if we had time, we'd drive across from Barton City, the town where our cabin is at, over to Mayo, and then here to Grayling. And we'd visit for the afternoon his big sister and her husband, and they were just great people. And I never knew my grandfather. My grandfather, Vincent Berg, J. Vincent Berg the First, passed away about 5 years before I was born. So in a way, Uncle Dud became a bit of a surrogate grandfather to me. And he was really about that age for me because my dad was the youngest of 7 children, and he was born in 1930. His sister Ange was born in 1918, so 12 years older than him, and she wasn't even the oldest. There were, I think, 2 or 3 others that were older than her. I'd have to go back and look to see if she was the 3rd child or the 4th child, but she was definitely ahead of Dad by a number of years. And their children were much older than I was, and their grandchildren, some of them were older than me, some of them were my age or a little bit younger. So really, like I said, he was kind of a surrogate grandfather to me. And it was nice when I moved up to Grayling in 1998. I would come down and visit Dud all the time at the AuSable. And sitting under the pines along the river, I really got a chance to kind of breathe in the northern air up here. And it was part of helping this become my home. Yes, I live back in Chelsea again, but I frequently come to Grayling because I did live up here for 18 years and I miss it. And part of it was of having family here. Not only was Dud still here when I moved up here, but one of his daughters, my cousin Diane, and her husband, they lived actually right at the top of the property where my aunt and uncle had bought their property on the AuSable River, just not even a couple of miles outside of Grayling by road, Highway M72, by water, by river. I think it was, I don't know, it was a few miles down. I want to say 4 to 6 miles. I don't know the exact length of time, but it was a very short drive down from the city right into Grayling, and they were on the river, but the road going in from M72 was 3/4 of a mile long or so. And Diane and Tim, their property was right up there at the top of the road. And then Breakfast Point, the name of my aunt and uncle's property, was down, as I said, on the river. And that's a cool name. It got its name because at one time, early in Grayling's history, when it was becoming a big grayling and trout fishing destination, the fishing trips, the guided fishing trips leaving Grayling early in the morning, probably before daybreak, they'd fish downriver, and for their breakfast stop, it was at the point of land where Schellenberger Creek, or what it's called now, it was originally, I think, called School Section Creek, flowed into the AuSable River. And that property, or that area, was always known then as Breakfast Point, because that's where the guides would this would be where the guides would pull up onto the side of the river, onto the bank, and they would build a fire and cook breakfast for their customers, for the ones they were guiding. And so they'd have a nice hearty breakfast. I don't know what breakfast was for them. And then they would continue on fishing farther down the river to wherever they were taking out. And at Breakfast Point, it was also a nice place to stop because there was an old railroad bridge that came across. And if you've ever canoed down the AuSable River, you might remember where there's some pilings in the river, and it's very easy to get a canoe or kayak tied up on that if you get kind of crossways on the river there and you get pushed up by the current against those pilings. That was my uncle's place. And he was very well known in the area. Big white beard. He was a portly man. Liked to wear kilts and a Scottish cap because he was of Scottish background, and would play bagpipe music, not on actual bagpipes, but recorded music. So he looked like Santa Claus, dressed like a Scotsman, and listened to Scottish music, basically a good identification of him. And he was well known and well loved on the AuSable River. But he had a good history back behind him. As I mentioned, he was born in Chelsea, or maybe I didn't mention it. He was born in Chelsea in 1918, same year that my Aunt Ange was born. So they grew up together. Both the Burg family and the Foster family were well known in Chelsea. My grandfather had the Chelsea drugstore. When the family moved, the kids and my grandmother lived in Chelsea the entire time. My grandfather was commuting between Chelsea and Detroit, where he had a drugstore for a while, and then he bought the one in Chelsea in 1924. And so, Dud and Ange would have gone to school together. I don't know if Foster's, the clothing store that was later owned by Dud's brother Bob, was named that at the time, but at some point it became Foster's with its sister store Vogel's, which was a women's clothing store, and they were connected by a passageway between the two buildings, or the two storefronts. And it had one of those great old-fashioned bubbler drinking fountains. So I know in Wisconsin and other parts of the Midwest, drinking fountains are called bubblers. Well, this was one of those old-fashioned ones, and it was cool to go into the store as a kid and get a drink of water in there at the bubbler drinking fountain. But anyways, I digress. So, they grew up together, and I don't know the year they married. Hopefully some of my foster cousins listening to this will get a hold of me and they can give me a little bit more of their family history when Ange and Dud were married. When their oldest son, Micky, or Mike, was born, he was the only one born before World War II. And they later ended up having 7 children. The last 3 were triplets. So they thought they were going to have 5. They ended up with 7. But so anyways, so prior to World War II, or actually probably at the time of the U.S. entry into World War II, Dud volunteered for the United States Navy Reserve in lieu of getting drafted, I suspect. And I know that when the Willow Run bomber plant, where Henry Ford had built B-24 bombers, when that went into production, both Dud and Ange were working there, and they were living in Willow Run Village, that I'm pretty sure of on that as well. And they were working there. So I don't know what the specific jobs that Ange and Dud had, but I always like to believe that my aunt was a Rosie the Riveter, and Dud, did his fair share of work there in the factory as well. And then when he was called to active duty, they returned back to Chelsea, or at least Ange and little Micky, Mike, was they went back to live in Chelsea, and my grandparents were still alive living there in Chelsea, and I suspect probably the foster grandparents were too. So they were there, stayed with them, and Dud went off to the Navy. And in the Navy, sounds like a Village People song, but his job in the Navy, he was assigned to an LST, a landing ship tank. And these were some of the amphibious invasion craft that were used in amphibious invasions throughout the war. For him, he was going to Europe, and to destination was going to be France. Operation Overlord, what we know as the Invasion of Normandy, D-Day. It took place June 6, 1944. LSTs, though, they were used in the Pacific War, so he could have easily gone to the Pacific Fleet and involved in the island hopping campaigns in the Pacific, or to the Philippines. And when Douglas MacArthur made good his promise of "I shall return" when he had to leave the Philippines at the beginning of the war, when the Japanese attacked and overran the Philippines in 1944, as well. The Philippines were invaded. So he could have easily gone to the Pacific Fleet. But no, he went to the Atlantic and then to the European Invasion Fleet. And he was on an LST. And LSTs could land on the beaches, but normally what they did is that they had an open hull. They had a gate on there, and they had ships or boats in there, LCMs, landing craft men, LCTs, landing craft tanks. These would be smaller landing craft that could fit in the hold of the LST, and they could launch invasion forces, U.S. Army or U.S. Marine soldiers in the hulls of those the smaller landing craft. And so his job was on one of those LSTs. And it's a little confusing a little bit about what he exactly did, because he had told me in one of my many visits to him on D-Day at the river, I would go down. Now, I didn't move up there till 1998. And so I had only very few D-Days to visit him, 5 in all, 98, 99, 2000, 2001. And I can't remember if we did 2002, because by that point he was fairly ill. And he ended up passing in August of 2002. So I think it may have only been 4 that we missed. I missed the 2002 visit because of his health. But anyways, in one of those visits, he told me that he was actually involved with the invasion, where they were basically using a smaller landing craft with tows on them, big winches, and they were used to pulling the boats, the landing craft off of the beaches, those that got stalled out or those that were damaged, and they were blocking the way on the beach for others to come in. And if that is what he did not write down about that, because at a certain point, and it appears that it was after the D-Day invasion, because it begins dated July 6th, so a month later, he started keeping a diary. And it looks like it was more like notes. And he was jotting down things that he remembered of the time during the invasion. And they're dated July 6th, July 7th, July 8th, and so on. So these are a month after the invasion. But what he's writing about is clearly the invasion of Normandy a month earlier in June and the events after that. So I think what he was doing is he was thinking about writing some sort of memoir, maybe. I don't know. I don't know if any of his children. I'm thinking most in particular my cousin Diane and her wife Tim, who lived in Grayling for so long. They unfortunately moved away. They retired to Florida a number of years ago, so I haven't talked to them closely about this. But they were the ones who told me about their time, Diane's parents' time of working at Willow Run. So I know that they talked to him, and I know Tim did a lot. Tim was a very much interested in World War II history. So Tim, Diane, if you're listening to this, please contact me and tell me what anything additional you can explain to me on this. But anyways, going back, Dud said that he had worked on a LCM crew where they had a tow, a hoist on there, a winch that would pull these boats off to help clear it for the beaches for others. But again, it doesn't really mesh with what he's written down. So I don't know if that has happened for sure, but I do know that prior to the invasion, he was told he had to have a specific type of surgery. Now, I can't talk about the surgery here on air. The family members have asked to keep that private. They don't want that aired of what he was afflicted with, of what he had to have surgery. But however, he wanted, or his surgery, I don't know if it was the doctor was a hack or what, but it got infected. And it bothered him quite a bit during the invasion, and he was down in his quarters at the start of the invasion. But with the action happening, he couldn't stay in his bunk while his buddies were serving their duties. He was assigned to one of the guns for defense of the LST, so he went to his post and fought at his gun as much as he could, and doing the other duties that he had to do. So that's not all written. He writes stuff down about that, but again, not of actually working on on any of the recovery boats. And then another thing that he doesn't write down on there, but he told me about it again, is that after the invasion, and this would have been 6 days later on June 12th, Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Britain, the war leader of our greatest ally, the United Kingdom, he came and visited the beaches, and particularly he visited the British beaches, British and Canadian beaches. But he came ashore at I don't know which Mulberry it was, but those were the artificial harbors that were built, and they were built in sections and floated in, made of huge concrete and grounded. They were sunk down in there to allow ships to come in and unload supplies and men. But for Dud's LST was tied up to the Mulberry there, and it was used as kind of a transfer point for some of the ships, for personnel, to get from a bigger ship that came into the Mulberry. They came down onto the deck of the LST and got into one of the smaller landing crafts to go into shore. There were a road causeway coming out from the Amalberry to the beach, but that was used for shipping cargo and supplies for personnel, especially non-military personnel. They went in on the side, and that's exactly what Sir Winston Churchill did. Unfortunately, Dud was down in his quarters. He was still recovering from his surgery from the infection, and he was off duty and he was lying in his bunk. So he found out afterwards that Winston Churchill was on board their ship. So he always kind of kicked himself, at least what he told me, that he had a chance to meet the British Prime Minister, because Churchill did meet the men, shake hands of the sailors that were on duty. So that just kind of helped, kind of gives you just a little bit about this. So I want to now transfer over to his diary. And this was provided to me by my cousin Caroline, or I guess technically she's my first cousin once removed. Her dad, Scott, was one of Dud's children. Let's see, I think it went Micky, and then Diane, and then Scott, and then Kathy, and then the triplets that were Molly, Pat, and Steve. And sadly, Micky passed away a number of years ago. Steve passed away a few years ago, and Scott most recently passed away this past spring. And I got a chance to visit him one last time in February on one of my frequent trips up here to Grayling, but he was the one who took over the family property at Breakfast Point, and so I got to spend time with him and his late wife Tina for a number of years before I moved away, and then their children Nathan and Caroline, I'm friends with too, and Nathan's only a few years younger than me, so you can see where I'm the same age as my cousin's children. But anyway, so Caroline shared with me at her father's memorial service in June information here, and then so she sent me scanned copies of the diary because her dad had given it to her. And so I'm going to read off the passages here, and these are in the order of that he wrote them. And like I said, they're not necessarily in chronological order. I can see things in here that happened before or after some of the other things in here, but this shows the war, what he did during the war. This was his only time in combat, because at the time of the end of the war in 1945, he was training for the invasion of Japan, and so thankfully, not only did he survive Normandy, but he never had to do what was considered basically a suicide mission for what he was supposed to do, working on rocket barges that were going to be towed in and launched, basically floating with just small outboard motors to kind of help steer it, and fire rockets off of there, and then they'd be sitting dead in the water. This would have been during the invasion of beaches in Japan, so that never happened. The war ended before that. So here we go. And as I mentioned on here, I think these were written down a month after the Normandy invasion, because the first passage said right on there, July 6th. Invasion started. Still in bunk. I'm a sad sack. The next day on the 7th. And I'm not going to name each days when these are written, just to get you an idea here. Some are just one passages for a day. Some are many. But here, finally our orders came through. Somewhere in France. Pulled out in small and slow convoy, mostly troops on LSTs, still laid up, helpless, and with a funning feeling, got to be okay. Proceeding at very slow pace, all guns manned, still laid up but hobbling around a little. Every general quarters, I couldn't stand staying in my bunk. Order brings order. I would hobble to Transit 2, which was his gun assignment. Every time I closed my eyes, I would see Ange and Mike. As I mentioned, his wife and son. Funny, but I couldn't think or worry about myself, just my small family and inconvenience it would cause to be killed. Still in channel, over 30 hours. No chance for sleep from midnight on. Everything seems to happen. I couldn't help but dread the idea of abandoning ship and soaking operation in salt water. So they would have got got the call for launching on June 5th because they needed to be there early on June 6th. But they were a slow convoy, and they were not apparently the first wave. I think that they had the 90th Division, which was the second division going in at Utah Beach, one of the American zones. Explosions and fires, flares all over the places. Enemy explosions. We knew we were on course to France, on the move all night. So even though it was a surprise to the Germans, they didn't know where it was going to go, but they knew there was going to be an invasion. So you had the patrolling planes that would be dropping flares to identify or to see ships and try to bomb them. So this was, something that was typical happen. At about 10:30 a.m., dropped anchor near St. Marcouf Island. Never saw so many ships together. Still firing, cruisers and destroyers arriving. Beachhead still not secure. Every once in a while, they fire back. As I mentioned, this was Utah Beach. The St. Marcouf Islands were small islands just offshore of Utah, and they were actually the first things that were attacked and secured by the American invasion force. There were no Germans on the island, but they had abandoned it and left heavy minefields on the islands, and then also mined the bays. So they always had to worry about mines for the ships. Coming in this morning, saw lots of wreckage, including empty life jackets and also a couple of bodies and some objects that must have been body parts. A hospital ship is near us. They bring LSTs by full of wounded and dead. Not a cheerful sight. Still pasting the shoreline with the big guns. Looks as if we're going to witness a beachhead being made. Lots of work to do on my guns, but must sleep. Had about 4 hours sleep out of 24 hours. Worried about Bob. Brother Bob, this is his brother Bob Foster, I mentioned, had the store in Chelsea. Awake with a start feeling he had been hurt. Remember how he always was getting hurt and nothing ever happened to me. And Bob Foster indeed would also survive the war and come back home to Chelsea. Here is on the 9th. He writes, 3 raids yesterday, 6 planes down. This is a hot spot. Still landing troops and shelling shore. In raid at 3 o'clock this morning, one bomb hit just off our stern. One hit a Liberty ship, loaded about 300 yards ahead of us. Seabees busy repairing all kinds of landing craft. Saw my first Germans captured. A Liberty ship was a ship that was basically a cargo ship. It carried equipment, ammunition, supplies, and it was basically an armed cargo ship that was used for fighting. So one that was a loaded one, there was all that cargo on board that would have been lost. LST sunk off port bow by floating mine. Boy, oh boy, I would like to get ashore and get some souvenirs. My 10% cut is coming pretty good. It's a good feeling to be doing my share of the work again. I don't know what he means by that, but he obviously was feeling better and starting to be able to continue to do the work. And this very well could still be on June 6th, or, there was still fighting going in the next day still, too. We were shelled off and on all day by shore batteries, so I'm thinking still June 6th. During night, 6 bombs dropped. These would be bombs, that were being dropped on or, at the naval fleet out in the channel, the English Channel. Damned close. Damned close. Shrapnel fell all over the ship. Saw dogfight. Saw planes strife beaches and watched our heavy bombers blast enemy shore. Plenty of noise during the night, but not close enough to bother us. Still within range of enemy guns. Between you and me, they're out to get us. They don't like the idea of us fixing on all the small landing crafts. We shall see. My what you call it is still bothering me. I don't walk any more than I have to. Battleships and cruisers still pounding the coast, almost firing over our heads. When we have a little time off, we play blackjack, $1 a hand. It's a good diversion when we need one. I would give a month's pay, if I had any, for a good snappy letter from my wife. Salvaged gun parts from LST 499 sunk and sitting on sandbar near shore. Heavy bombers and battleships still pounding shore. and evening watched Army drop approximately 300 paratroopers over enemy territory. Now, this is something I'm adding in here. It's, my thought is, now, wouldn't it have been a funny thing that some of these heavy bombers, they were B-17s and B-24s, but if some of these heavy bombers that were bombing the beach there were B-24s that were the Ford Consolidated Bomber built at Willow Run, and maybe some that Dud and Ange had their hands in building, and then they're now helping him, trying to protect him off there on the beaches of Normandy. Just a thought there. It's just something that makes me think. Oh, here, I should have waited on this because on the same passage, also had whiskey salvaged off sunken ship. Operation still bothering me. Half the time it's being treated with sulfa powder. Up again last night as per usual. Planes must have been dropping mines as no bombs fell. Lately, we don't bother to sound general quarters at night, as we so far have never been permitted to fire at night, bombs or no bombs, for fear of giving away our position. Salvaged 4 20-millimeter guns off sunken ship. So they've been, at this sister LST that sunk, they've been salvaging everything they can off of there. 20-millimeter guns are great anti-aircraft guns used to protect the ship as as planes are attacking them. So they always want to have extra ones there. If one's damaged, they can put one in. They're light guns. They can easily be dropped in and replaced. All hell broke loose last night. They dropped flares, bombs, mines. One dive bomber dropped a load of bombs on the port side and another just off of our stern. They are after us. I hope our luck holds out. Minesweepers are dashing all over the place today, exploding floating mines. 2 just went off about 300 yards off the bow. I moved so quick last night I pulled a couple of stitches out and am walking a little careful today. Mines were the greatest danger for all of these ships in close quarters. This was not an area where U-boats would have been operating, very shallow waters, but mines dropped by planes, and they're just floating there and waiting for either the current, the tide to bring in those mines up against the hull of a ship, or a ship, moving about, maneuvering, and blindly running into one. So they had the minesweepers out that were there basically as mine destroyers. Here's another thing here. Was given 25 hours extra duty today for not shaving. Talk about lowdown. Enough said. And at time like this. This was during battle. And yes, in the Navy, on those ships, they were expected to be clean shaven at all time. They were able to bathe regularly. So these were things that, yes, they were orders, but this was combat. Now, the soldiers in the field on the ground, once they landed off the boats, they had no time for bathing, for shaving, not until they got R&R, rest and relaxation, recuperation afterwards. And usually that was the first time they'd be able to get clean clothes, bathe, shave in, days or weeks or sometimes even months. So here he was getting 25 hours of extra duty for not shaving. We'll come back to that later, and there'd be kind of a laugh and irony there. Another wild night, but no damage. Heard the plane motors, then whistle of the bombs. Not a nice sound. I wish they could come in the daytime, so Tressie 2, that must have been a nickname for Transit 2, his gun emplacement, would do some real damage. We moved in near the beach today. A breakwater was made by sinking 7 freighters in a half-moon circle in quite shallow water. We are anchored in the middle of calm water, firing LCUs and LCMs and LCTs. So the breakwater made of ships, this was helped to protect those mulberries, as I mentioned, the artificial harbors that were created, built of concrete and steel. But they built these breakwaters, basically sinking old ships, old freighters, to break the waves coming in, and would give it a little bit protected there. Now, they weren't perfect because on June 19th, so just over 2 weeks after the invasion, a terrible storm hurricane force winds and storm surge would take out one of those mulberries, one of those artificial harbors. And it was left with just one of them then down on, it would take out the American one at Omaha Beach. And whatever was left of it was used to help reinforce the British mulberry down on one of their beaches further down the coast. So, this was the thing. He survived the battle. He survived the hurricane, the storm there. So he dealt with a lot. So here he is, though. With that, he got first mail from home. I'm a new man, but a lonely one. Yes, you get a letter from home, but you also realize how much you miss your family. And that didn't matter where, with talking about the CCC boys last season, they would be very happy when they got letters from home, but then they would realize how much they missed their family. Same thing with the men and women in the armed services during World War II. And turn right back to the war. Another warm reception at night. 40 millimeter crew, another anti-aircraft, fouled up, or we would have had a Ju-88 to our credit. That was a German fighter bomber or dive bomber. So these were ones that were trying to take out the ship. So it would have been a big deal for them to take out one of the planes that were attacking them. One aboard a half-sunken freighter and salvaged guns, 3-inch 50 parts for Tressie 2. I'm not sure. I think the 3-inch guns, they were a small artillery gun. Also could be used for anti-aircraft, but also used for firing onto shore. And then I'm not sure the 50 parts, if that's supposed to be 50 caliber machine gun parts. Those were also these heavy machine guns that could be used both for anti-aircraft and anti-personnel. So they salvaged those and looked at the wreckage. Not a pleasant sight. The ship was bombed. Another rest-interrupted night, but no damage. Still have a couple of stitches left in me, still a little tender. Transport hit a mine during the night, didn't sink yet. This is not his boat, but was another. A transport usually carried men, and so they would have been served by the LCMs, the landing craft men. A lot of action during the night, but nothing too close. At noon today, LST 532 was sunk about 200 yards off our stern. Was fully loaded and sunk in about a minute. Not too many survivors. We had about 50 of them aboard, and some are really beat up, some dead. So this is where I think that he's got the time, not in chronological here, and he's remembering passages and writing them down whenever he can on each day. So he probably was intended to go back and clarify this, write it in order, but he never had the opportunity, or he just chose not to. First quiet night, but they still were over and dropped their accursed mines as they do every night. Awful storm raging, going on its second day. So we're now talking June 19th. Ship has turned into a hospital ship. So this is his LST. Still bringing them aboard. LST capsized during the night, and LCMs and LCVP, landing craft, vehicle, and personnel, sinking right and left. So these are the small crafts, and they're sinking. So this is not from combat. These are the ones that are being lost during the storm, and the survivors are being brought onto his LST to be treated for their wounds. I wonder who and when the mines are going to hit today. So also mines. The storm really will move them around easily. So yeah, the mines, they were floating freely. So yeah, the storm could move them anywhere. Doc has been going steady for 24 hours, one operation after the other. Worst enemy today is still the storm. We now have over 100 survivors aboard. Rugged-looking lots. No shaves, no bathes, no clean clothes since invasion. So here we go. They're not getting their 25 hours of extra duty. They're survivors. They could be men that were, wounded on shore, or they were men pulled from the water from their boats sinking. Freighters that served as our breakwater are breaking up in the storm. 3 of them are broke now. Shore is piled with wreckage of small boats. More mines dropped during the night, but thank the Lord, no more sinkings. So this one, I'm pretty sure he was at the Omaha Mulberry, because that was the one that was destroyed by the storm. Quite a quiet day and night with only the storm to contend with. Doc cut off one of the survivor's legs and part of another fellow's hand. Two horribly bloated bodies floated by. It makes a fellow to do a lot of thinking. Quiet day, storm abated. Left gun covered with salt and oil. Lot of work to do. Heard our mail was sunk on way from England. Hope it wasn't true. Commenced landing troops again. Got rid of 148 survivors yesterday. Means that they were taken off of the boat and probably transferred to a hospital ship or a transport heading back to England. But that's where the diary ends, at least the information that Caroline has provided me. So Caroline, I know you're going to be listening to this. If you have more of your grandfather's diary, I'd love if you shared it with me. And, if we can, kind of go on to a second part of this, because I know that he eventually went back to the States and he started training for the invasion of Japan that was planned to happen in late 1945, early 1946. But the dropping of the atomic bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 ended the war. And so he was spared being part of a second major invasion of an enemy homeland. And because, he always thought that, the bombs saved his life. And also the fact that, his other 6 children never would have been born if he had been part of the invasion of Japan. So we're not here to discuss, the good and the bad of the atomic age kicking off in 1945. But I don't know. I feel like I can't really talk about what happened to Dud after Normandy and how he felt, how it affected him. Every soldier, every sailor, every serviceman and woman who experiences war, it affects them all differently. And if they're right in combat, or if, like my dad, who served in a MASH hospital at the end of the Korean War, or at least the end of the active war. Technically, that war has never ended, but he was there in 1953 as the ceasefire caused the war to end, and was there for another year after that. But everybody experiences or deals with their experiences differently. So I don't know if it affected Dud, and if that led to him eventually wanting to live up here in northern Michigan. Because for me, this is my peaceful place. And I know it is for many other people too. Was this the peaceful place for Dud and Ange eventually? I mean, it was 30 years after the war. War ended in 1945. They moved up here in 76. After the war, back home in Chelsea, he worked in factories. But they also, for a time, owned the pub, which was the name of a little watering hole, a bar that they owned and operated for a few years. And if you go to Chelsea today, the site of it is now Cleary's Pub. That location has always been a bar of some sort. And it was once rumored to be our great-grandfather's bar. A man named Conrad Spurnagel, my dad's mom's father, he was a saloon owner in Chelsea in the late 1890s and the early 1900s. But turns out that was actually located on another block. So family legend, family lore is wrong on that one. But anyways, they owned the bar, but he worked for Rockwell. I don't know what they were making there at their plant in Chelsea, but that closed in 1976. So that's when they decided we're going to retire early. And they already owned property in Grayling that they sold, and then bought the riverfront property. And then they worked it and developed it into a beautiful spot today that is a gem. And I'm glad that family members of mine, cousins, own that now. And it's a place where I can still come up now that I don't live here anymore. And it's a bit of a refuge. And I get a lot of that feeling. And I know Dud did too, sitting with him on on the banks of the river when the weather was good, inside his home there when the weather wasn't so good, he enjoying his glass of scotch and I enjoying a beer. And because he was Scottish, he always had Scotch ale. And the founders in Grand Rapids, they had their Old Dirty Bastard Scotch Ale, and he loved that one. He was not a beer drinker, but he loved that beer, mainly because of the name and that it was a Scotch ale. So that was the one beer he drank. But so this was home for him, and working on this in the last couple of weeks made me realize how much I miss him. He's been gone for 23 years now, and life moved on. I had other relatives who lived there for a while in Grayling, here in Grayling. My cousin Diane and her husband, her son Jason, lived in Grayling for a while too. He moved out west with his wife out to North Dakota, Montana to work out in the oil fields out there. And then, as I mentioned a few years back, Tim and Diane moved down to Florida. But in the meantime, that's where my cousin Scott and his wife Tina moved back to Michigan from Wisconsin. Scott was a school teacher. And when he retired, he was kind of splitting time between Grayling and Portage, Wisconsin. And then they made the full move here to Grayling. And Tina passed away a few years ago in 2020. And then Scott earlier this year, 2025. But so I want to dedicate this episode not only to Dud and Ange. I visited their markers yesterday at the family property, but also to Scott and Tina, and then all of their children, all of their brothers, sisters, cousins, everybody who has a deep, feeling for Breakfast Point and just for everybody who loves up north. We all come up here for our different reasons, but I think it all affects us the same way. And I shouldn't say happy Veterans Day, but thank you to veterans. It's not happy that you served for the country, served in war, for those who did that. But thank you to all of the veterans. And thank you to Dud Foster and writing down your memories. And that's what made this possible, this episode. So thanks again for listening to another bonus episode of North Country History with Rob Burg. I got to thinking, do I want to do another November one? Deer season begins here this coming weekend, but I'm not going to have time to get another one out for November. So just enjoy. And Christmas is coming next month, and I will be doing a Christmas in the Logging Camps episode somewhere right around December 25th. I haven't looked at a calendar yet. I don't even know what day of the week Christmas falls on, but we'll get one released right around Christmas time. And then season 3, I can't believe we're already to that point, is starting in January. And as of this past week, we hit over 2,500 downloads. So another milestone on the North Country History broadcast or podcast. And it would be great if you click that support button and help me out. Whatever money that comes from there goes right back into making this possible. It keeps me on the air. So if you can support with just as little as $3 a month, it all helps with keeping me on the air, and I appreciate that. So thank you, and we will talk again. Bye. North Country History with Rob Burg is hosted, written, and produced by Rob Burg. Music is Crack o' Dawn, performed by Reveille, licensed through Soundstripe. Follow North Country History with Rob Burg on YouTube and on Facebook at Rob Burg, Environmental Historian.